Peace, family. We are here because an atrocity is happening right now, a political lynching, a, a moral outrage is taking place as we speak. Today, the House of Representatives had advanced a resolution to censure Rashida Tlaib. Anybody that doesn't know Rashida Tlaib, she is a Democrat out of Michigan. She is the only Palestinian American in Congress. She's one of two Muslims in Congress, and she is being censured allegedly because of her remarks about Israel Palestine, because of her actions following the October 7th attacks on Israel from Hamas. And for some reason, the Congress has decided that instead of focusing on a ceasefire, instead of focusing on creating peace or justice in the land, that they are going to target, smear, and punish one of the most courageous, honest, and consistent voices in our U.S. Congress. Now, the vote just took place maybe an hour ago. The vote was 213 to 208, very much along party lines. The idea was the Democrats said, look, let's table this. Let's kill the resolution. 213 people said, we will not table this resolution. 208 said they will. So 208 to 213 was the vote. Now, the problem with that vote count means that if the same people show up the next day, tomorrow, Wednesday, and vote the same way, then she will be formally censured by the House of Representatives. Now, 8 people didn't go to work. I'm sorry, 11 people didn't go to work. 8 of them Democrats. So you would think that if everybody shows up for this vote, it gets defeated and tabled. So the fact that those 8 Democrats didn't show up says something about their constitution. It says something about their courage. Also, one Democrat from my state of Pennsylvania, Susan Wild, voted present. What does it mean to vote present? It means that you're not voting yay or nay. You're just saying, I'm here, i.e. you're punting, you're being cowardly. Why are they targeting Rashida Tlaib? Well, let's start. First, they say that she was justifying the Hamas attacks. They say that she was justifying the Hamas attacks. She did not justify any attacks. What she did do was explain what got us here. You see, you're allowed to talk about context when you're beating up on poor people. You're allowed to talk about context when you're saying, well, the reason these people are poor and the reason why the welfare state has failed them and the reason why these people are going to bed hungry in the richest empire in human history is because their families are bad. Their families are wrong. They have a culture of poverty. You're allowed to explain why poor people or black people or these people or that people are jacked up so that you can let the state off the hook. You can let the system off the hook. But when you try to have a systemic analysis, when you try to give a historical breakdown of why we get to a place, now they don't want that. So after the Hamas attacks on October 7th, 2023, a month ago today, some people said this is an outrage. This is awful. Innocent Israeli civilians shouldn't be killed. I was one of those people. I hold that opinion. So does Rashida Tlaib. The attacks were indefensible. The attacks were morally unconscionable. Full stop, period. We also have to have another conversation. Some people only wanted to talk about that and not talk about the conditions that got us there. That's what we meant when we said history didn't start on October 7th. That's what I meant when I said it. And I know that other people mean the same thing. They're saying that, yes, what happened on October 7th was awful. How do we prevent another October 7th? How do we prevent more innocent people from dying? How do we prevent more babies from dying? You have to analyze the conditions of Gaza. Gaza is an open air prison. The people of Gaza have not had 1 minute of self-determination. Israel did not leave Gaza. They redeployed their troops to the border. Israel still controls Gaza by land, air, sea, a population registry, electromagnetic sphere. Every part of Gaza is controlled by the Israeli state. It maintains effective control over the area. That means it's still occupied. Why is this important? Because it's those conditions that create the kind of economic depression, the kind of anger, the type of radicalization that is the right would call it, that lead to the kind of outcomes that happened on October 7th. You can't continue to oppress people and be surprised at their response. Again, I don't defend the response. I reject the response. I think that you cannot kill innocent people. Let's be clear, though. An occupied people has a right to defend themselves. An occupying power does not have the right to self-defense against the people and in the lands where they are militarily occupied. I can't occupy your land with the military and say I'm defending myself when they're resisting me. But the right to self-defense is not absolute. It is not without limits. That means you can't kill civilians. You can't kill the babies. You can't kill the children. You have to focus on military targets. So that's why I disagree with Hamas's tactics. But we still have to have a conversation about how we got here. Rashida Tlaib is having a conversation about how we got here. But the fact is, they don't want to hear about 100 years of settler colonialism. They don't want to hear about 75 years of ethnic cleansing. They don't want to hear about 56 years of military occupation. They don't want to hear about 16 years, 17 years of siege. They don't want that conversation. So what do? They say anybody who talks about anything but that day and only that day must be justifying the attacks. If somebody's on drugs, if there's a drug epidemic, if people are smoking crack, and I say, you know what, don't smoke crack. Smoking crack is an awful thing to do. Let's figure out the mental health issues, the socioeconomic issues, the family structure issues, that the governmental policies that got us to a place where people are taking drugs and committing self-medication and self-harm. Does that mean I'm promoting crack? Or does it mean I'm trying to give you a breakdown of how we got here? We need to be able to have that level of analysis. Rashida Tlaib is one of the few people in Congress that was saying, yo, let's have that level of analysis. And yet they still say that she was justifying Hamas. What else do they say she's doing? They said Representative Rich McCormick, a Republican from Georgia, argued that Rashida Tlaib's statement about the attacks was a defense of terrorism and also a call for an attack on Israel and a call for the destruction of Israel. Rashida Tlaib said that we have to call for the end of an apartheid system that creates the suffocating, dehumanizing conditions that can lead to resistance. We need to end the apartheid system that creates the suffocating, dehumanizing conditions that can lead to resistance. Again, now they're saying, and by they I mean the people in Congress, they're saying, well, if you call Israel an apartheid system, then again, you're smearing Israel. You should be censured for calling Israel an apartheid state. That is a misrepresentation. It's a smear. It's an attack on Israel. People like Alan Dershowitz will say, and Alan Dershowitz has said this to me personally, I fought against apartheid South Africa. This is not like apartheid South Africa. You know nothing about apartheid South Africa. Well, let's look around Israel right now and have that conversation. Let's be very clear. By the way, please hit the subscribe button as you're watching this. I'm bad at telling people this, but hit the subscribe button. I hear the likes matter too. Hit the likes, hit the subscribe button, do whatever you can to support this page. I'm doing this to get the truth out here, to have a conversation and to fight for justice. So subscribe and hit them likes, family. When you look at the state of Israel, okay, what is apartheid? To be an apartheid state, you do not have to be like South Africa. The conventions on apartheid do not say that an apartheid state is a state that's exactly like South Africa. That's a straw man. Oh, it's not like South Africa. No, it's true. But if you have a system of racial hierarchy, if you have a system where people have different levels of citizenship, different levels of access, different levels of privilege, different levels of freedom, different levels of systemic treatment, based on their racialized or racial identity or religion or ethnicity or even gender. Oh, now you're an apartheid state. And guess what? When you look at historic Palestine, you look at all of that region, what do you see? Well, inside the state of Israel, which is what most pro-Israel people will focus on. Let's say Palestinians have the same rights as non-Palestinians inside the state of Israel. Okay. When you say that, first of all, you're leaving out the fact that there are millions of people who can't be citizens of Israel. They lived in Israel. Their grandparents were born in Israel. If I were to go to their cemetery in Jerusalem or in Ramleh or in Nazareth or in Wadi al-Khawadith, I'll find a whole lot of people who 17 grandmothers back were born and lived in what is now known as Israel, which was founded in 1948. But after 1948, more than 770,000 of them were kicked out, never to return. They were forcibly removed. They were expelled. Don't believe me? Read these books. Read Ilan Pappé's book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. He's an Israeli historian who can really break this down. So the reason they're in the West Bank, the reason they're in Bethlehem, the reason they're in Ramallah, the reason they're in Al-Beireh, the reason they're in Tul Kerem is not because they want to be. They're in Tul Kerem because they got kicked out of Wadi al-Khawadith. They're in Khan Yunis, not because they want to be, but because they were kicked out of Israel during the formation of the state. So to say all people, all Arabs, all Palestinians have the same rights as non-Palestinians in Israel, even if that were true, that's because you kicked all the people out who can't get back in. They can't marry their way in. They can't perform their way in. They can't behave their way in. They can't work their way in. But also the people who are Palestinian citizens of Israel, which you would call Israeli Arabs, who make up about somewhere between 18 and 20% of the Israeli citizenry. There are about 60 laws on the books that may be facially neutral, but are discriminatory by virtue of how they are applied. I'll give you an example, the Nakba law. It is against Israeli law to commemorate the Nakba or the 1948 events as a moment of tragedy, as a moment of negative commemoration. In other words, I can't talk about the formation of the Israeli state as a bad thing. Imagine having a law in the United States that said that Native Americans couldn't talk about Thanksgiving as a bad thing. Just to give you some context, right? But it wouldn't say Native Americans can't. It said nobody can. Nobody can talk about Thanksgiving as an awful event on their lives. Now, if you're a pilgrim, it wasn't. If you are Native American, it was. So the law is facially neutral, but it has a different impact on Native Americans. Similarly, we could look at admissions committees in the Galilee that say, well, you can move into this neighborhood if you sustain the social and cultural fabric of the neighborhood. It's not just in the Galilee, but that's just one example. These kinds of rules, these types of laws create something here. Anyway, so when she says it's an apartheid state, she's not saying it's like South Africa. She's saying that the rules and the laws aren't fair. There's a checkpoint system. There's different rules for where you can live, how you get treated. If we're in Jerusalem and we both get arrested, you're in West Jerusalem, and you're an Palestinian Israeli citizen, and I'm in the West Bank. I'm in East Jerusalem. I have an iqama. I don't have a Joez. I don't have a passport. I don't have a Hawiyya because I'm not in the West Bank. I'm getting different treatment based on where I live. The Israeli citizen's getting civil or civil court or criminal court. The Palestinian who's in the West Bank is getting military court for the same crime. We could get arrested at the same time. This is people say I'm ignoring their questions. I'm not, y'all. I'm new to this. I don't see the questions. I want to focus on this is what Rashida Tlaib is talking about. I apologize. I'll try and take some questions. I'm new to this, y'all. So that's what she's talking about. They say that Rashida Tlaib should be censured because she used the phrase "from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," or "free Palestine from the river to the sea." Now I know a little something about this phrase. I was fired from CNN the day after I used this phrase, and at the United Nations. Recently, we've seen more people get punished for using it. In the UK, Andy McDonald, who's a Labour Party member, was fired for saying between the river and the sea in a pro-Palestine rally. Suella Braverman, Home Secretary, said that these are hate marches, and anybody who uses that language is calling for the destruction of Israel. What does it mean to say from the river to the sea? First of all, the phrase from the river to the sea is not a Hamas slogan. People say it's a Hamas slogan. Well, does Hamas use it? Sure, I'm sure they do, right? Hamas didn't create it. Hamas doesn't own it, and Hamas doesn't use it exclusively. What does it mean to say from the river to the sea? From the river to the sea means from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. It's referring to all of the land in historic Palestine. When I say in historic Palestine, I'm referring to not just the West Bank and the occupied territories, but what is now Israel, what is the West Bank, what is Gaza, the Golan, the Sinai. I'm talking about all of it. What is that language important? Well, because before the formation of Israel, there have been multiple attempts to partition the land. There's a UN resolution in 1947, but there's also the Peel partition a decade prior, the Peel partition plan. But when the Ottomans had it, when the British had it, the Ottomans had it from the 1500s to the 1900s, right? About 1914 to 1917. It ended the Ottoman rule after World War I, effectively. The Balfour Declaration comes in 1917. The British ruled mandate Palestine, the British mandate for Palestine for 3 decades, leading right up to the formation of Israel. And over that time, the region that was called Palestine, whether it's the Ottoman Palestine or British Palestine, was bigger than just what we're talking about now. It was bigger than what we call Israel now. Why is this important? When people say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, they're saying that Palestine needs to be free, not just in the occupied territories, not just in the West Bank, but also in Gaza. It also needs to be free inside for Palestinians inside of Israel. It's a call for everything. Now, has it always meant that? It's meant different things to different people. In the 1960s, the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, were calling for, at that time, a single Palestinian state. That's absolutely true. From the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, to take up all the historic land. That was 1964. And even then, it wasn't calling for the destruction or the killing of Jewish people. It was calling for a single state. The Likud Party, this is important, was founded in 1977. For those that don't know, the Likud Party is Benjamin Netanyahu's party. It's a conservative party. It's a nationalist party. You want to talk about nationalism. It is a self-identified conservative party and a nationalist party. And when they talk about Eretz Israel, they're talking about, based on the Bible, all of the land given to the Jewish people being Israel. And the Likud Party, in their original manifesto in 1977, said that Israel is everything from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. So river to the sea ain't just a Palestinian thing. Israelis, Netanyahu's party, has been saying river to the sea since 1977. Although he deleted the tweet, Netanyahu's son also tweeted river to the sea like 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Meaning, are they calling for the destruction of all Palestinians? Well, maybe. But that's not what Palestinians are calling for. The call river to the sea is not a call to kill or remove Palestinians or Jewish people from the land. When I said it at the United Nations, it didn't mean that. And when Rashida Tlaib says it right now, it does not mean that. What it means is that when you say river to the sea, you're not conceding that Palestinians will just live in Bantustans. You're not going to allow them to live in a couple hundred ghettos in the West Bank as the Oslo Agreement provided and say that that's freedom, that's justice. No. Justice also means ending the siege in Gaza. No. Justice also means creating equal rights for Palestinian citizens of Israel in every place that was called Palestine, in historic Palestine. from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, everybody should have justice, peace, freedom, safety, dignity, and self-determination. That's what river to the sea means. When Rashida Tlaib says river to the sea, she was not calling for the destruction of Israel. And she made that clear. She said very clearly that river to the sea, quote, I'm going to quote her, is an aspirational call for freedom, human rights, and peaceful coexistence, not death, destruction, or hate. So even if you thought she meant something different, she was very clearly saying, look, I don't mean that. You can't get me messed up because I'm clearly saying it. But because somebody says, well, river to the sea means Hamas, then suddenly that's all it can mean. And it's not, this isn't some verbal sleight of hand or some word trick. No. Again, river to the sea historically has been used by liberal groups, moderate groups, conservative groups, radical groups, by Jews, by Christians, by Muslims, by Israelis, by Palestinians. It's been used by everybody in different ways. And she's been very clear and articulate about what she meant by it. So again, the dishonesty of saying that she didn't mean that. And then they say that she was engaged in anti-Semitic activity. Marjorie Taylor Greene, the representative of Georgia, tried to censure Tlaib last week for anti-Semitic activity. They said that she started an insurrection. Was it an insurrection or was it a protest? An insurrection? The audacity of people who actually led an insurrection on January 6th, saying that a pro-Palestinian protest is an act of insurrection when they don't think January 6th was an insurrection is shameful. I would laugh at it if it weren't so audacious and dangerous. So then they just amended the censure and said, oh, we got a new censure for you. And now they're saying, well, she criticized the Israeli state of genocide. Now, let me be very clear. Whether you think what Israel is doing is a genocide or not does not matter if you believe in free speech. A person has a right to say that, even if you disagree. I'm old enough to remember when Republicans, because it was like last month, were saying everybody has a right to free speech. We shouldn't be canceling people. We shouldn't be firing people. We shouldn't be doing this and this and this to people because they have unpopular views. But once again, there is the Palestinian exception. You can criticize anything except the conditions that create Palestinian unfreedom. That's something else. But let's be clear. I'm not just making a First Amendment philosophical argument. The case can be made for genocide. Yes, Israel disagrees. And Noda Erakat said this recently. Is there any country in the history of the world that has committed genocide and said, yes, we're committing genocide? Never once has that happened. But let's define genocide. Not my definition, not Marc Lamont Hill's, not Rashida Tlaib's. Let's look at international law. International law defines the crime of genocide as, quote, the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. An intent to destroy in whole or in part. That's the December 1948 UN Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. Now, you can say that's not what Israel's doing. We can debate that, but you don't censure somebody for it. But let's be clear. Israeli Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant said on October 9th, we are imposing a complete siege on Gaza. No electricity, no food, no water, no fuel. Everything is closed. We are fighting human animals and we will act accordingly. So they are human animals. And we're cutting off food, electricity, fuel, and water. They are in hospitals and they will die if they don't have electricity. There's no humanitarian corridor out that is actually safe. It sounds like genocide. It's certainly not crazy to call it genocide. The UN Genocide Convention lists 5 acts that fall under the definition. I'm going to name 3 of them. 1, killing members of the group. 2, causing serious bodily injury or mental harm to members of the group. 3, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. The Israeli Air Force, by its own admission, has so far dropped more than 6,000 bombs on Gaza. There's an article by Raz Siegel that talks about this. It's in Jewish Currents. It's called A Textbook Case of Genocide. He breaks all this down. 6,000 bombs have been dropped on Gaza, one of the most densely populated areas in the world, 25 miles long, 5 miles wide. That's almost as many bombs as were dropped in Afghanistan the entire time the U.S. was there. That includes phosphorus bombs, which set fire to buildings and to people, creating flames, literally flames that cannot be extinguished with water. Gaza's been under siege for 16 years. That is the longest in modern human history. A complete siege turns it up a notch. That's according to Yoav Galan. What's my point here? When you have people saying they're going to flatten Gaza, erase Gaza, they're going to knock them back 3 generations, turn Gaza to tents, you're talking about completely wiping out a population in Gaza. That is a genocide. And it doesn't matter whether Israel agrees. It doesn't matter whether Joe Biden is afraid to say it. It doesn't matter if we continue to censure people who speak the truth. It is a genocide. And there's absolutely no way to fight that argument. Y'all got me worked up here. I'm going to say one more thing, then I'm going to leave y'all alone. Rashida Tlaib right now will be censured tomorrow if this continues. For calling Israel an illegal occupation. The West Bank is illegally occupied. Settlement expansion is illegal as well. For saying river to the sea, for saying apartheid, for saying that we need to study the problem and not just focus on the awful acts of October 7th. Again, they're awful. Let's acknowledge how awful they were, how indefensible Hamas's behavior was on October 7th. And at the same time, let's figure out what got us here so we don't ever have to repeat it. That's what she's saying. That's what we're all saying. And yet she's still going to be censured. Now, some of y'all are saying, what's the big deal about a censure? She's not going to get fired. She's not going to get impeached as a president would. She's not going to lose her job. It's just a formal reprimand. It's like something just goes on your record. You may argue, some may argue, so what? Who cares? Rashida Tlaib will be okay, no matter how this turns out. But when we look back on this moment in history, and we will, because as Dr. King said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. When we look back on this moment, we will be ashamed of ourselves as a nation because we will have funded a disproportionate, excessive, destructive, and ultimately genocidal response to Hamas's behavior, to Hamas's actions. We will have consistently funded the assault on the Palestinian people. And we will have censured one of the most courageous, honest, and consistent voices in Congress in Rashida Tlaib. All because we live in a world where we still believe that Palestinian lives, that brown lives, that black lives, that poor lives are simply not worth as much. That they're disposable. The censure, she'll survive. She'll even thrive from it because she's a warrior, she's a fighter. But it's our national shame. And that's what we gotta live with. That's what we have to live with as a country. So I implore every single one of those members of Congress, the 208 people who voted the right way, to stay strong. The one person who voted president, I need you to join the 208 and make it 209. The 11 people who didn't show up, I need you to vote your conscience too. And if everybody does the right thing, Rashida Tlaib's censure will not happen. It will be defeated. But if it does happen, it's going to say a lot about who we are as a country. And it's going to say a lot to Democrats about who they are as a party. All right, family, I'm going to see y'all later. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you follow me. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit them likes. This is how we hold this platform. This is how we do the work that we do. I love y'all. Free the land. Free all political prisoners. Peace.